In March 2009, the body of 65-year-old Evelyn Mallister was discovered in a blood-soaked honeymoon suite at the luxurious Coral Palms Resort in Nassau, Bahamas. The investigation would reveal a tragic story rooted in a whirlwind romance with 67-year-old Vietnam veteran Gerald Mallister. What began at a veterans fundraiser in Atlanta, Georgia, in September 2008, ended in a nightmare on the morning of March 7, 2009. The Coral Palms Resort, known for its serene beaches and indulgent luxury, woke to a horror that shattered its tranquility. Guests eased into the day, some savoring breakfast on sunlit balconies while others prepared for excursions. On the 5th floor, however, a discovery turned paradise into chaos. Evelyn Mallister lay lifeless on the cold marble floor, her body surrounded by dark, congealed blood. The brutality of her final moments was etched into her broken form, bruises swelling her face, deep lacerations tracing her arms and torso, and defensive wounds scarring her hands. The room was a ruin of splintered furniture and shattered glass, blood spattered across cream-colored walls. A once celebratory champagne bottle, now a jagged weapon, rested near Evelyn's twisted body. A housekeeper's screams echoed down the hallway after she noticed the "Do Not Disturb" sign had hung on the door for too long. Trembling hands clutched at a radio as she called for help. Within minutes, resort security and Nassau police stormed the suite, pushing through the scent of blood and fear. They found Gerald Mallister on the balcony, a silent, vacant figure. He wore a wrinkled, blood-stained shirt. His hands were bruised, knuckles raw. The officers noted the sharp tang of alcohol as he muttered incoherently, mumbling about things going wrong. He offered no explanation, only fragments of regret and confusion. Forensics meticulously combed the room, photographing blood spatter patterns and gathering shards of broken glass. The champagne bottle was bagged as evidence. The investigation painted a grim picture. Guests reported hearing a heated argument on the night of March 6th, muffled voices, crashing furniture, and Evelyn's voice, sharp with anger, before a scream cut through the night. One neighbor recalled hearing her shout, "You lied to me," before a heavy silence fell. On March 8th, police formally questioned Gerald. He claimed he remembered nothing of the previous night, blaming alcohol. The empty bottles of rum and whiskey confirmed his binge, but physical evidence told another story. His knuckles bore the marks of violence, and deep cuts on his hands suggested a brutal struggle. Gerald insisted he awoke on the balcony with no memory of the carnage inside, and detectives dug deeper. A darker story emerged. Gerald's past, marked by a decorated military career, also carried whispers of rage. Anger issues attributed to PTSD from his Vietnam service were well known. Though no violence had been reported in past relationships, his temperament was described as volatile. Evelyn was a gentle soul, a retired schoolteacher seeking love after losing her first husband. Yet just weeks before the wedding, she had transferred a significant sum into a joint account, despite private concerns about Gerald's financial stability. Friends noted she had been anxious but hopeful, believing their marriage would mark a fresh start. This financial decision loomed over the investigation, a potential motive shadowing Gerald's silence. Evelyn's trust had cost her dearly, and questions of greed and betrayal swirled around her tragic end. The once idyllic resort stood tainted by bloodshed, its beauty forever marred by a love story turned nightmare. As the investigation unfolded, the timeline of events became clearer, yet more questions emerged than answers. What had triggered the violent argument overheard by neighboring guests? Why had Evelyn screamed those chilling words, "You lied," to me? And most hauntingly, how had Gerald's past and the couple's fragile trust led to the bloodshed in their suite? By March 20th, 2009, the evidence was compelling enough for police to charge Gerald Mallister with murder. What had started as a romantic honeymoon in paradise had become a grim tale of betrayal, violence, and loss. The tragedy seemed inevitable, woven into the very fabric of their relationship long before their fatal stay in the Bahamas. 6 months before the nightmare at Coral Palms Resort, Evelyn Mallister's life appeared to be on the cusp of a new beginning. At 65, the retired schoolteacher from Savannah, Georgia, had devoted herself to nurturing young minds and caring for her ailing husband, who passed away after a grueling battle with cancer. Though outwardly composed, Evelyn was quietly haunted by loneliness, yearning for companionship and the love she had lost. That longing brought her to a veterans fundraiser in late September 2008, a gathering draped in American flags and military pride, where the past and present collided in bittersweet nostalgia. It was there she met Gerald Mallister, a 67-year-old Vietnam War veteran. Tall and imposing, with a weathered face etched by time and war, he commanded attention effortlessly. His tales of combat, laced with pride and unspoken pain, captivated the room. To Evelyn, he was a man marked by courage and hardship, the kind of strength she had admired in her late husband. Conversation flowed easily, and by the end of the evening, a spark had ignited. Gerald's charm was intoxicating. He praised her kindness, admired her resilience, and made her feel alive again. Their romance escalated quickly. Gerald visited often, bearing flowers and whispered promises, filling Evelyn's home with laughter and a sense of hope. Friends and family noticed her transformation. She was vibrant, optimistic. But even as the whirlwind romance consumed her, whispers of doubt gnawed at the edges. Gerald shared little about his past, save for his military service. He introduced no close friends or family, and whenever Evelyn asked about previous relationships, his responses were evasive, deflected. With jokes or brusque changes of subject, Evelyn tried to rationalize his secrecy, chalking it up to the scars of war. 3 months after their first meeting, Gerald proposed. Evelyn, surprised but flattered, accepted. She confided in her younger sister, Margaret, who was less convinced. Margaret had glimpsed Gerald's temper, a flash of anger over a harmless joke at a family gathering, and worried about the man her sister was so eager to marry. Evelyn brushed off her concerns, attributing Gerald's reaction to the ghosts of Vietnam. She wanted so badly to believe this was her second chance, but cracks in Gerald's facade soon widened. In mid-January 2009, Evelyn made a disturbing discovery. Helping Gerald pack for their move to Savannah, she stumbled upon his open laptop, an old, battered device, and found a series of emails exchanged with a younger woman named Angela. The messages were flirtatious, their tone unmistakably intimate. Evelyn's stomach twisted as she scrolled through the digital betrayal. The emails predated their relationship, but the lingering hurt was undeniable. When she confronted Gerald, he dismissed her concerns, calling Angela a meaningless fling from the past. He was smooth, reassuring, convincing enough for Evelyn to swallow her doubts, but trust had been fractured. Over coffee on February 1, 2009, Evelyn confided in her best friend, Maria. She admitted she still loved Gerald, but questioned how well she truly knew him. Maria, practical and blunt, urged her to slow down and reconsider. Yet Evelyn's heart overpowered her judgment. She wanted to believe Gerald's promises. More shadows surfaced weeks later. Gerald asked Evelyn to co-sign a loan, claiming it would resolve lingering debts from his post-military life. He spoke of a clean slate, a fresh start unburdened by financial woes. Despite her hesitation, Evelyn relented. She had been left financially secure by her late husband's careful planning, and she wanted to support Gerald. The paperwork was signed, and a substantial sum transferred into their new joint account. Gerald's gratitude was effusive. Overly so, Maria later remarked. But Evelyn was changed. Friends noticed she seemed distracted, her usual warmth tinged with something heavy and uncertain. The woman who had once glowed with new love now appeared haunted, trapped in a decision she could not reverse. As the wedding date neared, Evelyn was left to wrestle with doubts she could no longer ignore. In the end, Evelyn's trust would cost her everything. The nightmare in the Coral Palms resort was merely the final chapter in a story of manipulation, betrayal, and desperate hope. The promise of love had blinded Evelyn to the danger lurking behind Gerald's charm. The question was never if the tragedy would unfold, but when. In the weeks leading up to their honeymoon, Evelyn's unease grew. She confided in Maria about Gerald's spending habits, reckless in ways she hadn't anticipated. The details of his financial struggles seemed inconsistent, but Evelyn convinced herself that trust and compromise were essential to any relationship. She threw herself into planning their trip to the Bahamas, choosing the Coral Palms Resort for its reputation as a romantic getaway. On a call with Margaret on February 28, 2009, Evelyn sounded optimistic. "Once we're away from the stress, we'll remember why we fell in love," she insisted. But her forced cheerfulness masked a deepening dread, lingering doubts about the flirtatious emails, Gerald's secretive past, and their precarious financial arrangements. As she packed for the trip, Evelyn placed a leather-bound journal into her suitcase, a trusted confidant for decades. She planned to use the quiet moments on the island to reflect and find clarity. She had no way of knowing those pages would remain blank. March 6, 2009, began like any other evening at the Coral Palms Resort. Warm air, ocean breeze carrying, the muffled hum of laughter and soft music. The couple dined near the water, a coveted spot where moonlight kissed the waves. Evelyn, in a light floral dress, looked every bit the happy newlywed. But friends would later recall how quiet she'd been in the days leading up to the trip. Across from her, Gerald sat in a crisp linen shirt, his broad shoulders tense, eyes averted. Their silence was palpable, a simmering unease hidden behind strained smiles. The waiter, accustomed to serving honeymooners basking in affection, noticed how the couple barely spoke. Evelyn picked at her food, her gaze flicking down to her plate. Gerald focused on his drink, swallowing hard. Nearby diners sensed the tension, away. Quiet so unnatural it echoed louder than any argument. Halfway through the meal, the pretense shattered. The argument began quietly, but it soon escalated. Evelyn leaning forward, words urgent and strained, while Gerald responded in clipped, dismissive tones. The waiter, pouring water nearby, noticed the desperation in Evelyn's eyes. Whatever she said made Gerald's expression harden. His jaw clenched tight. Then Evelyn stood abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the stone floor. She stormed out, leaving Gerald behind. He remained seated, glaring into his drink before rising slowly and heading for the bar. Evelyn walked briskly through the resort's pathways, hands clenched at her sides. A guest lounging by the pool noticed her sitting alone on a bench, her face buried in her hands. They considered approaching, but decided against it. Evelyn sat there for a long time before returning to their suite. Security footage showed her walking unsteadily through the hallways after midnight, clutching her purse tightly, her face drawn and haunted. Gerald, meanwhile, had settled in at the bar, ordering whiskey after whiskey. Resort staff observed his demeanor shift, brooding silence giving way to muttered frustrations. The bartender offered to call someone, but Gerald declined. By the time he stumbled back toward the suite at 2 a.m. on March 7th, he was visibly agitated. The security cameras caught him pacing outside the door, running his hands through his hair, fists clenching and unclenching. Then he entered. What happened next was pieced together from fragmented evidence and muffled recollections. Neighbors on either side of the suite reported hearing raised voices. Evelyn's tone was pleading, desperate, while Gerald's was low and venomous. The argument swelled until a heavy thud rattled the walls, then crashing sounds, violent and unmistakable. One neighbor considered calling security but hesitated, dismissing it as a lover's quarrel. Then came the scream. Sharp and raw, it froze those who heard it. A nearby guest later described it as a sound of pure terror, brief but searing. Silence followed, stretching endlessly. What happened in those moments was revealed only through the shattered remnants of a romantic getaway turned nightmare. The suite was a testament to rage. Broken furniture, bloodstains, and Evelyn's lifeless body sprawled across the floor. When authorities arrived, Gerald was slumped against the wall, dazed and reeking of alcohol. The love story had become a crime scene, trust twisted into betrayal, devotion drowned in violence. Evelyn's leather-bound journal lay untouched in her suitcase, its pages blank, a final unspoken reflection of promises broken and a life destroyed. When hotel staff discovered Evelyn's lifeless body on the morning of March 7th, the honeymoon suite had transformed into a scene of horror. The luxury of the Coral Palms resort was marred by broken furniture, shattered glass, and the stench of blood. Evelyn had tried to defend herself, as evidenced by deep cuts on her hands and arms. The struggle moved across the room, violent and desperate. Blood patterns on the walls and floor told a harrowing story. Evelyn had fallen more than once, each time struggling to rise before being struck again. A champagne bottle from the resort's honeymoon package lay shattered, fragments glistening, like cruel reminders of what should have been a celebration. The room's elegance was replaced by chaos and violence, a testament to the brutality that had unfolded. Security footage confirmed that no one had entered or left the suite after Gerald's return. When hotel staff found him hours later, he was on the balcony, knuckles bloodied, the strong stench of alcohol clinging to him. His gaze was distant, unfocused, and his demeanor was a strange mix of shock and indifference. Questioned by police, Gerald's responses were fragmented, evasive. He admitted to an argument but claimed a fog of alcohol obscured his memory. Investigators quickly pieced together the volatile mix of insecurities, accusations of infidelity, and mounting financial tension that had erupted into violence. Gerald's insecurities had festered, and Evelyn's confrontation, her desperate questions, were met with a rage that tore her apart. As the sun rose over the Coral Palms resort, the suite was cordoned off, yellow tape glaring against the pastel walls. The nightmare was over, but its echoes would linger. The blood was scrubbed away, the shattered glass replaced, and the resort returned to its tranquil facade, yet whispers of what had happened stained the air. The trial began months later, and the courtroom was a theater of grief and outrage. Reporters packed in tightly, pens scratching feverishly, while spectators leaned forward, eyes wide with morbid fascination. Evelyn's family endured each excruciating day, every harrowing detail of the crime painting vivid, agonizing pictures. The prosecution laid bare Gerald's manipulation, his lies, insecurities, and the desperation that pushed him to brutalize the woman who had only ever offered love and understanding. Evelyn's journal was presented as evidence, pages with growing doubts and troubled reflections. She had seen the cracks in his facade but clung to hope. It was her kindness, her capacity to forgive, that he'd exploited and ultimately destroyed. On December 14, 2009, after 3 weeks of gut-wrenching testimony, the jury returned. The foreman's words, "guilty of second-degree murder," fell heavily in the room, a strange mix of relief and bitterness washing over those present. Gerald McAllister was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Evelyn's older sister, Margaret, clutched a worn photograph of her sister, fingers trembling as if the image alone kept Evelyn's memory alive. When the sentence was read, her sobs echoed softly, the grief so deep it felt endless. Justice had been served, but Evelyn was still gone. Kindness betrayed, love discarded. Witness after witness exposed Gerald's manipulative tendencies, how desperation and unchecked anger had metastasized into a cold, brutal violence. His decorated past as a veteran was no shield from the truth. He was unmasked as a fraud, who saw Evelyn not as a partner, but as a means to bolster his crumbling life. The prosecution argued convincingly, Evelyn's kindness had been her fatal flaw. She forgave even when the truth gnawed at her, until Gerald's rage consumed her. Yet, amidst the damning evidence, Evelyn's life shone brightly, a devoted teacher who shaped young minds, a widow who had refused to let grief harden her heart, a woman who wanted to believe love could heal. Her journal's final pages were filled with hope, tempered by doubt. But hope had proven fatal. In the aftermath, questions lingered, unanswered and haunting. Could Evelyn's death have been prevented? Should she have listened to her instincts, walked away before it was too late? And what of Gerald? What if he had sought help instead of letting anger consume him? The man once respected by his community had become a grim cautionary tale, proof of how desperation and rage could destroy everything. The trial ended, but the pain remained, an unfillable void left in Evelyn's wake. A life snuffed out, a love story twisted into a tale of betrayal and brutality. Gerald would rot behind bars, but the true cost of his rage could never be repaid. The resort would carry on, masking the violence with ocean breezes and moonlit waters, but those who remembered would never forget the darkness that had shattered a life forever. As Gerald was led away in handcuffs, his face expressionless and eyes empty, Evelyn's family was left to confront the ruins of their world. The trial had ended, but the pain was far from over. Grief clawed deep, and the path to healing stretched out bleak and uncertain. Days bled into weeks, and Evelyn's name became a grim warning, a story whispered in cautionary tones. Her death stood as a chilling reminder of the danger in ignoring instinct, of the fatal cost of misplaced trust. But for those who truly knew her, Evelyn was more than a tragic headline. She was a beacon, a woman defined by warmth, kindness, and strength, whose love had touched countless lives. Her memory endured not as a symbol of victimhood, but as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Those who loved her refused to let her light fade, determined to honor her by remembering the courage, compassion, and grace that had defined her life, qualities that no act of violence could ever truly destroy. Yet the shadow of Gerald McAllister lingered, a dark stain that could never be scrubbed away. His monstrous actions were etched into the fabric of Evelyn's story, a constant reminder of how deception and rage can turn love into a weapon. The brutality of that night haunted everyone touched by it, a ghostly reminder of the fragile line between devotion and danger. But even as the darkness threatened to consume them, Evelyn's family chose to carry forward, not defined by the tragedy, but by the love she had given so freely. A love that endures even when life is shattered. A love that remains unbroken. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more disturbing true crime stories. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Let us know what you think. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.